You must learn your place.
It was for the master's birthday.
They threw Emily Carter out of the kitchen before the bread had finished rising. Not because she had stolen anything, not because she had broken a dish, not because she had spoken out of turn to a guest, spilled soup on a duchess, or committed any offense worth remembering. She had simply used one corner of the grate. Hawthorne kitchen * to bake a small sugared cake for her little brother's birthday. That was a la cake no wider than 2 hands. Made with flour she had bought herself, * sugar she had saved for, and 3 eggs given to her by old Mrs. Abbott from the tenant cottages *. Emily had risen before dawn to prepare it, because Tommy Carter was turning 10 that day, and the fever had kept him in bed for nearly a month *. He had asked for nothing except to taste something sweet again. Emily had almost finished glazing it when Mrs. Blackwell entered. The housekeeper did not shout at first *. That was what made the room afraid *. Mrs. Blackwell was a woman who had governed Hawthorne Manor's lower floors for 20 years, and she had learned long ago that a quiet voice could frighten servants more effectively than a loud one. "What is that?" Emily turned from the work table with the little cake between her hands *. "For my brother." "Ma'am *, I used my own," before she could finish. Mrs. Blackwell crossed the kitchen, took the cake from her, *, and dropped it into the ash bucket beside the hearth. The kitchen went silent. One scullery maid gasped *. A footman near the door looked away *. The cook, who had been kneading dough at the far table, stopped moving entirely. Emily stared at the ash bucket. The cake had landed upside down. The sugared top was already blackened. "My brother is ill," she said. Mrs. Blackwell removed the speck of flour from her cuff *. "Then perhaps he should learn early that illness does not entitle the poor to luxuries." Emily's face went white. "That kitchen," Mrs. Blackwell continued, "belongs to Hawthorne Manor *. It does not belong to girls who forget their place because the Duke has been absent long enough for standards to collapse. I didn't forget my place." "No," the housekeeper said. "You mistook kindness for permission *. That is worse. Then in front of every servant in the room." She ordered Emily Carter not out of the kitchen for the morning out of service by noon. Emily's small trunk had been brought down from the attic room she shared with 2 other maids * by 1. Mrs. Blackwell had her wages counted onto the table in 6 cold coins * by 2. Emily stood at the servants' entrance holding everything she owned, and trying very hard not to cry. She failed only once, not when Mrs. Blackwell dismissed her, not when the kitchen door closed behind her, not even when she thought of Tommy waiting for a cake that would never come. She cried when cook pressed a wrapped loaf of bread into her hand and whispered, "Forgive us, child, we should have spoken." Emily looked past her into the warm kitchen where she had spent 4 years of her life *. "Yes," she said softly *, "you should have." Then she walked away. If you love emotional romance stories about quiet women * who are underestimated until everything falls apart without them, subscribe now and stay with Emily until the very end. Duke Alexander Hawthorne returned to his manor 3 days later and noticed nothing that was not unusual. Men like Alexander were raised to believe houses ran because houses were supposed to run. Fires appeared in grates. Meals arrived at tables. Linen smelled of lavender. Letters were answered. Sick tenants received broth. Children in the village learned their letters on winter afternoons. The chapel flowers changed every Sunday. No one explained how any of it happened. And so the Duke, like many men born into comfort, assumed order was natural. It was not. It had been Emily, not officially. Officially, Emily Carter had been a kitchen maid. Unofficially, she had been the person everyone asked when things went wrong. She knew which pantry shelf stuck in damp weather. Which tenant child needed medicine but was too proud to ask. Which footman could not read the delivery lists. Which widow required coal before she would admit it. and which guests could not eat almonds because their throats swelled, she kept a small notebook hidden beneath her mattress. In it she wrote everything Hawthorne needed to remember, and everyone else forgot. Mrs. Blackwell had called it impertinence. Everyone else had called it help. The first problem came on Tuesday. The Duke hosted 4 gentlemen for dinner. Asterisk and the fish arrived late because no one had remembered that the North Road flooded after heavy rain. Emily always remembered. She would have sent the boy through the mill path before breakfast. Asterisk instead. The fish arrived half spoiled, and the cook shouted until 2 maids cried. The second problem came on Thursday. Mrs. Abbott from the tenant cottages walked 3 miles to the manor for the cough mixture Emily usually sent every week. Asterisk. The footman at the side door told her no such arrangement existed. Asterisk. Mrs. Abbott returned home in the rain by Saturday. Her grandson had the cough by Sunday. The chapel flowers were dead because the gardener's assistant had not been told. Asterisk. The vicar preferred white lily over yellow marigolds for morning services by Monday. The laundry lost 2 guest shirts. Asterisk. The pantry ran short of tea, and one of the dairy girls left in tears after Mrs. Blackwell accused her of laziness for failing to deliver cream that no one had ordered. Alexander noticed only the tea. Has the household been unusually disorganized? He asked at breakfast. Mrs. Blackwell stood near the sideboard, stiff as a poker. Asterisk. Temporary difficulty. Your Grace. Asterisk. The lower staff has grown sentimental. Sentimental? 1 girl was dismissed. Asterisk. Some of the others have made more of it than necessary. Alexander looked up. Which girl? Emily Carter. The name should not have meant anything to him. It did not strongly, not clearly, but somewhere in memory. There was a girl with brown hair who always lowered her eyes when he passed. Asterisk. A girl who once brought hot water to the library during a storm without being asked. Asterisk. A girl who had guided a lost child back to the nursery during the harvest ball. What did she do? Mrs. Blackwell paused half a second too long. Forgot her station. Alexander had heard that phrase all his life. Asterisk. It usually meant someone else had forgotten mercy. Send for her. He said. The housekeeper's mouth tightened. Asterisk. She is no longer in service. Then find where she has gone. But Emily had not gone far. She had returned to the village cottage where Tommy lay coughing under 3 thin blankets, and their aunt tried to stretch 1 loaf into 4 meals. Asterisk. The day after she arrived, Emily found work at the baker's shop. Asterisk. It paid less than the manor, but Mr. Pritchard let her use the ovens after hours. And on the 3rd night she made Tommy a small cake with no sugar glaze and 1 candle stuck in the center. He smiled when he saw it. That was enough at Hawthorne Manor. Nothing was enough 2 weeks after Emily left. The spring charity dinner nearly collapsed. It had been held every year for 37 years. Asterisk. The manor invited tenants, tradesmen, clergy, local families, and visiting gentry. It was supposed to remind the county that Hawthorne cared for the people living under its name. In truth, Emily had organized most of it for the last 3 years. Asterisk. She had matched families to tables so old disputes did not ignite over soup. She had written names for food parcels. She had marked which widows needed coal, which children needed shoes. Asterisk. Which laborers were too proud to accept help unless it was called seasonal wages. This year, Mrs. Blackwell managed it alone by 6 o'clock. The wrong families were seated together. Asterisk. By 6:30. 2 tenant farmers were arguing over a boundary ditch. Asterisk. By 7. The soup was cold because the kitchen had miscounted servings. Asterisk. By 8. Mrs. Abbott's grandson was coughing so hard near the door that the vicar left his seat to help him. Alexander watched the evening unravel with growing disbelief. He had attended that dinner for years. Asterisk. It had always moved smoothly, warmly, almost effortlessly. The poor were fed. The proud were spared embarrassment. Asterisk. The elderly were noticed without being displayed. Asterisk. Children received parcels with their names written correctly. He had thought Mrs. Blackwell did that. He had thought the household did that. He had thought many things, then he saw the little boy coughing by the door. "Who is that child?" he asked. The steward beside him answered, "Tommy Carter, Your Grace, Emily's brother." The name struck him again. Emily, the steward continued before caution could stop him. Asterisk. She used to send medicine to Hemrs BBO to his cottage asterisk, and coal to the Finch widow asterisk, and she taught half those children to write their names. Alexander turned slowly. Emily Carter did that? The steward looked suddenly frightened. But the truth, once invited, rarely leaves politely. "Yes, Your Grace." And Mrs. Blackwell knew? Everyone knew. Sir, that was the sentence that changed everything. Everyone knew, everyone had known, that a kitchen maid was quietly carrying asterisk the moral weight of Hawthorne Manor, while its master accepted credit for benevolence he had not earned. The next morning, Alexander went to the kitchen. He had not entered it in years. The room fell silent at once. Asterisk. Servants froze. Cook nearly dropped a pan. Mrs. Blackwell appeared from the pantry with a face full of irritation that quickly arranged itself into obedience. "Your Grace asterisk, we were not expecting." "No," Alexander said. "I imagine not." He walked to the work table. "Tell me why Emily Carter was dismissed." Mrs. Blackwell's chin lifted. Asterisk. "She used Manor supplies for personal purposes." "What supplies?" "Flour, sugar, eggs." Cook made a sound before she could stop herself. Alexander turned. Asterisk. "Speak." Cook's hands twisted in her apron. Asterisk. "She bought the sugar herself." "Your Grace, Mrs. Abbott sent the eggs. The flour was from her own ration." Mrs. Blackwell snapped. "That is not the point." "No," Alexander said quietly. Asterisk. "The point is that you threw a sick child's birthday cake into ash." The kitchen seemed to stop. BRE8. ING. Blackwell went pale. Alexander looked around the room. Asterisk. At the maids, the footmen, the scullery girls with red hands and frightened eyes. Asterisk. "And all of you watched?" Nobody answered. That was answer enough. He left the kitchen and rode to the village. Within the hour Emily was kneading bread when the Duke of Hawthorne entered Mr. Pritchard's bakery. She saw him through the flour dust for a moment. She looked exactly as she had looked at the servant's door, with her trunk in hand, tired, guarded, and much too young to have been carrying so many burdens. "Your Grace," she said, not warmly, not bitterly, just correctly. Alexander removed his hat. Miss Carter, the baker, retreated into the back room with the speed of a man who did not wish to witness nobility apologizing. Alexander looked at the dough beneath Emily's hands. Asterisk. "I came to ask you to return," she resumed, kneading, "to the kitchen." "To Hawthorne. There is a difference?" There should have been. That made her look up. He deserved the doubt in her eyes. Asterisk. He knew it. "I have learned what you did for the estate," he said. "For the tenants, for the children." Asterisk. "For my household." Emily's expression did not change. Asterisk. "Did it take 3 weeks for them to tell you? Or 3 weeks for you to notice?" The question landed cleanly. Alexander accepted it. Both for the first time. Something like surprise moved across her face. He continued. "Mrs. Blackwell has been dismissed." Emily's hands stilled. "She served your family for 20 years and forgot what service meant." The words hung between them. Emily looked away first. "Not from weakness." Asterisk. "From memory. My brother needed a cake." "I know." "No," she said. "You know about the cake." Asterisk. "That is not the same thing." Alexander had no answer, so he gave the only one that mattered. "You are right. The bakery was quiet except for the soft sound of rain beginning against the windows." "I am not asking you to return as a kitchen maid," he said. Asterisk. "I am asking you to return as household welfare steward." Asterisk. "Paid properly." Asterisk. "With authority over tenant relief, staff care, charity accounts, and village education. You will report to me directly. No one will throw away anything that belongs to you again." Emily stared at him. No one in her life had ever offered her authority before, only work. "There is a difference. And if I refuse?" She asked, then Hawthorne will have to learn how to be decent without you, asterisk. He paused, but I hope you don't refuse, not because we deserve you, asterisk. Because the people you helped still need someone they trust. That was clever, too clever. Emily nearly smiled despite herself. You are asking for my conscience. Your Grace. No, he said. I am asking for your terms. She studied him, then really studied him. The Duke was not the cold statue the servants whispered about, asterisk. He was a man who had inherited a house full of habits and mistaken them for order. That did not excuse him. But perhaps it explained why apology looked so difficult. On his face, my brother comes with me, she said. Yes, he sees a physician. Yes, the children's lessons continue. Yes, cook gets another assistant. Yes, and the kitchen staff who watched me leave will apologize. Alexander nodded. They will. Emily wiped flour from her hands. Then, I will return for 1 month. Only one, he heard the warning. So did she when Emily returned to Hawthorne Manor. No carriage procession greeted her. No grand speech was made on the steps. That would have embarrassed her and satisfied the wrong people, asterisk. Instead, the entire kitchen staff stood in a line beside the work table where the cake had been. Destroyed cook spoke first. I should have stopped her. Scullery maid began crying before her turn arrived. A footman apologized with his ears red. Emily listened to each one. Then she said, do better next time. That was all. It was enough. 3 months later, Hawthorne Manor was not merely functioning again. It was better, not grander, better. Children came twice a week to the old laundry room for lessons, asterisk. Tenant relief was recorded. Properly sick lists were maintained. Staff wages were reviewed, asterisk. Food waste disappeared, asterisk. The kitchen no longer trembled when authority entered it. Alexander began visiting the lower floors every Thursday. At first the servants feared it, then they adjusted, then they began telling him things. That was the beginning of his education. He learned that dignity was not something a duke handed down from a staircase, asterisk. It was something preserved in details, asterisk. Hot broth delivered before pride had to ask. Wages paid before loyalty cracked, asterisk. A child's name spelled correctly on a parcel. Emily taught him that without ever meaning to, or perhaps she meant to. She had a way of correcting people by making them ashamed of being less kind than she was. The first time he laughed in her presence, she looked so startled that he laughed again, asterisk. The first time she smiled at him, truly smiled, asterisk. He forgot what he had meant to say for several seconds and had to pretend he was studying the charity ledger. Love did not arrive quickly. It would have been insulting if it had. Respect came first, then trust, then the kind of quiet companionship that grows when two people spend long hours fixing what others ignored. By winter, Tommy Carter was well enough to run through the back garden with a wool scarf flying behind him, asterisk. On his 11th birthday, Emily baked a cake in the Hawthorne kitchen, not secretly, not before dawn, asterisk, in full daylight, with cook helping and 3 maids arguing over icing. Alexander entered just as she placed the finished cake on the table. It was small, sugared, perfect. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he said, "May I?" Emily handed him the knife. He cut the first slice and gave it to Tommy. The boy grinned. Emily looked at the Duke, and something in her face softened. "You remembered," she said. Alexander looked around the kitchen, warm with firelight and flour dust and laughter. Asterisk, and understood that this room had once lost its heart, because he had not known where it was kept. "Yes," he said, asterisk. "I am trying to make a habit of that." Years later, people in the county still told the story wrong. They said the Duke discovered a poor kitchen maid and raised her up. That was not true. Emily Carter had already been standing. The Duke had simply arrived late enough to see who had been holding Hawthorne together all along. If Emily's story moved you, subscribe for more emotional romance dramas. Powerful heroines, *noble regrets, hidden worth, and unforgettable endings.